Just a reminder, you can catch me recording this podcast live on AMP. AMP is a new live radio app that lets you call in and chat with me in person while recording. Get the app on Apple's App Store and make sure you follow me at John Middlekauff to get notified when I go live. Live here on AMP on a beautiful Thursday morning, September 14th, which officially marks the start of Thursday Night Football on Prime. Last week, we obviously had a Thursday night game, the opening game, but I don't consider a true Thursday night game because you're not on short rest. This one is. We're recording before the game. We have a very good slate of NFL games. I mean, we always do. College, not as great, but here with my man Stuckey, who started red hot. 3-1 in the NFL. We touched on Colorado last week, as well as the Alabama-Texas line, which was, when the dust settled, that was stealing money. You can hear my man Stuckey, Big Bets on Campus. Go subscribe to that. Follow him on Action Network. They are all over everything gambling. They were way ahead of the curve. They were on the front lines before this thing got super mainstream. So, Stuckey, what's up, brother?
What's going on? Yeah, NFL, we should have swept if the Colts could get 1 yard. The first time I've ever seen the Bush push not work. And then Anthony Richardson gets hurt and Gardner Minshew just throws away the cover. NFL teams get in there 99% of the time, just hand it off at down 2 possessions at the 1 yard line. So that was a super annoying cover, but it was just good to be back and sweat. I also had the Titans, and Vrabel decides to kick a field goal down 4, so that was beneficial. Just that 3 to 4 o'clock hour, if you're on the East Coast, or 12 to 1 in the West, it's just good to be back sweating those little plays all at once. So it's good to have the NFL back.
Yeah, it's, let's a little look back last week. Your guy Vrabel, who to me is just a stud as a dog, came through. I mean, they easily could have won that game if their quarterback just wasn't atrocious. And then the older version of Vrabel, Tomlin, not quite as a dog at home. That they got mollywopped. But yeah, what were some of your big takeaways from week 1 from a gambling perspective looking forward, beside obviously, the Rodgers situation? I'm sure we'll actually hitting on the Jets game coming up.
Yeah, I mean, Vrabel in the Titans game, they also had a clear, what looked like to me, a clear defensive touchdown.
Well, it was.
Yeah, and then they blew the whistle, and then they said they didn't overturn it, and they gave basically a 10-point swing, which was massive. But yeah, my biggest takeaways from week 1, there was a lot of ugly quarterback play. I think the yards per attempt across the league was the lowest it's been in 20 years. So there was just, I mean, you look at some of the average depths of target on some of these offenses, and then some of just the ugly performances. Unders had a really big day as a result. There was a lot of injuries, like a lot of hamstring injuries leading up to and then during the game. And I think that all traces back to just, we now have such a limited preseason, which I'm a fan of, but you just don't use a lot of these quarterbacks you don't even see play at all during preseason. So there's just not a lot of reps. And then you come in pretty rusty, and the defenses are, for the most part, ahead of the offenses. And then because of those lack of live game reps, you're more at risk of, hamstring injuries, groin injuries, which we saw a number of. But that was something that stuck out to me. The offenses were pretty ugly across the board, with a few exceptions. Your Niners, who were just rolling like that last season never ended before the injuries. That seems like they scored 30 every time out with Purdy now. But yeah, the offenses should pick up here. It was a really good weekend for unders and ugly quarterback play.
Did you see Trent Williams' quote? He said by about the third Steelers drive, he was so tired because they would go 3 and out so quickly. He started rooting for them to get first downs.
Yeah, he wanted to break. He was rooting for the Steelers, who at one point, maybe in 2 minutes, at the 2-minute warning in the first half, had 1 yard. So I feel you.
It was bad
on that, Trent.
Okay, before we dive into the NFL slate, I know there's a college game that you're kind of on, and I think he easily right now has the best nickname in all of football, college or pro, and that's Sunbelt Billy. Florida has become like the Texas before this year's Texas, where it's just like this, where coaches go there to struggle. The hype grows, and then they underachieve. Florida started the season out just looking terrible against Utah in a game we were all watching. And I told you before we hopped on, I had heard that, part of the transfer portal. It's a little like free agency. You go all in for Peyton Manning, and he goes to Denver, you end up without a quarterback. And I think they wanted Sam Hartman, and they ended up with Graham Mertz. This Tennessee team, I mean, last year really took the world by storm, right? That game against Alabama and the visuals of them carrying out the upright was really cool. I mean, that was a special moment for a program. But as you were telling me before we hopped on, they have not looked the same. And Florida, this is a home game. You're going in on Sunbelt, Billy?
I am reluctantly. I think when he was in the Sunbelt after a game, when he was being announced on when he was being interviewed on the sidelines, he said, "Scare money don't make money." And that's a clip you always play on our podcast. So I'm not going to be scared here because this is mainly a fade of Tennessee and their offense. The flashy parts of their offense were great last year, and everyone remembers the deep bombs to Hyland, who had 1 billion touchdowns against Alabama. And obviously they lost a lot on that offense. They lost their starting tackle to the NFL. They lost 2 receivers to the NFL, and then Hendon Hooker. And the thing that Hooker gave them, he obviously could make all of those deep throws, but he was extremely accurate underneath. And that's kind of the basis of this offense is, you're going to get those deep shots, but you have to keep the defense honest, and you got to take what's there underneath, and then you're going to hit the deep shots. And Milton just isn't accurate enough to get this offense, which is a timing and rhythm-based offense, into any sort of rhythm. I mean, they looked poor against Austin Peay last weekend, and there's a lot of drops, and their offensive line, they're still trying to figure out their first team all preseason SEC center, Cooper Mays. He's been out. We'll see if he can go this weekend. So there's been a lot of guys shuffling. You also lost a tackle to the NFL in the first round. So the offense is just off right now. And, they haven't really played anybody. They played Virginia. They put up 38 against Virginia. Virginia's defense is horrible. We just saw, a JMU throw for 350 and put up that many points against them. So, and then they played Austin Peay. The Tennessee defense still has a lot of holes. And what this Florida team wants to do, it's Graham Mertz, a quarterback. Like you said, the difference between Hartman and Mertz is massive. It's like, hey, a guy that's in running for the Heisman, and a guy who, it's had one good game in years at Wisconsin. He had like one good half, and he couldn't win in the Big Ten. But they want to control. They have 2 really good running backs. They're going to get their really good center who's going to play in the NFL eventually. He's back this week. Their offensive line has a lot of talent. They want to control the ball. They want to run the ball. And I think they could do that against Tennessee. And I don't think Milton can sustain enough drives. He's probably going to make a couple mistakes. Florida's going to, take away the run. They're going to make Milton beat him. And I don't think he can right now. He's just not consistent enough passer. So I think we'll make a couple mistakes, and that'll just lead into Florida controlling this clock, putting together some long drives. And I like the points here with Florida. I actually think that they pull off an upset. I don't think the market really knows yet that how bad this Tennessee offense is. Maybe they put it together here. Maybe Mays comes back and Milton has a great game. But from what I've seen, not just this year, but throughout his career, he just doesn't have the consistency in the accuracy department.
Yeah, I think if you look around the country, there's probably not a coach, if you remove the Mel Tucker situation, he's not even coaching right now, he's suspended, that could use a win like this at home against obviously a rival / the rival is resurrected, or at least feels like that from a national perspective. This would do wonders for Sunbelt Billy, and maybe we would just call him SEC Billy from then on out. Okay, let's.
Yeah, not only does he need the win, he's got to avoid the loss. Tennessee hasn't won in Gainesville since 2003, and they've never. Yeah, they lost 10 straight. They've never been a favorite, this high of a favorite in the history of the series. You can go all the way back to the 70s, 80s, whenever. This is the biggest favorite they've been, and they haven't won there in 20 years. So you want to avoid the loss, too, because Florida fans aren't going to like losing to Tennessee at home.
No, that's so even in some of their down years over this last decade, then that's Billy better win this thing. Okay, let's dive into the NFL. I've gotten a lot of DMs. I lived in the Bay Area in Northern California. I know a lot of Raider fans, and it's like, are we actually decent? Could we? And then after you watch Monday night, they're like, could we go into Bills Mafia? And it's like, hey, let's pump the brakes a little bit. But I would have told you 2 weeks ago, no chance. Who knows? I mean, Josh Allen, he did not look like a top 2 or 3 quarterback. He looked terrible. I mean, that's since he became a good player. Like if we removed his rookie year, that has to be the worst game he's ever played. eye test statistically. I mean, it was a joke, especially given what the other team was dealing with. It's like, hey guys, Aaron Rodgers in a boot under the stadium, just run the ball, dink and dunk. What are you doing? So now he's a veteran player. Peyton Manning, Tom Brady had shitty games. You can bounce back. It's at home. I got to be honest though. This is a stay away from me, but I'm just fascinated. Like, to me, this is going to be a big reflection because the Raiders are going to come in trying. Do the Bills, do they still got it, or is something off? I think we're going to find out this week.
Yeah, I laid it. I laid 8.5 with the Bills. And this is, look, Josh Allen was horrendous last week, but you go back to when Brady was in New England, there were years where he just, for whatever reason, he struggled with Miami's defense. And, some people would say it was the weather or whatever. The Jets defense is one of the best in the NFL. And over the past 2 seasons, if you look at, so this one game and then last year, so 17 games since one got canceled for the Bills in the regular season, Allen is 1-2 against the Jets, 2 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, averages 196 yards per game in the 3 games against the Jets. He was awful.
So you think it's more of a matchup thing now that they're good, less than it's just he sucks. And I know he doesn't suck. I just mean that he's declining, regression, whatever.
Yeah, he has these games. He does have a much more inconsistency than you normally see with some of these league quarterbacks.
I agree.
But against the Jets, it's just off the charts. In the other 14 games, he's 12-2, 64% completion percentage, 34 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, averaging 285 yards per game. Last year, he threw 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 140 yards against the Jets. The Bills ended up winning 8 of their next 9 games, and he was fine from a numbers perspective. Against the elite defenses, he still needs to get more consistent, but this Raiders secondary is not one of them. You got to worry about Crosby off the edge against Spencer Brown, but the Raiders secondary is bad. And, last week they just weren't tested. Russell Wilson averaged 4 yards depth of target, and the Broncos didn't have any of their weapons playing. Dulcich even got hurt in the first half, and Judy didn't play, and they have a bunch of other injuries. They just never tried to throw downfield. And Russ looked good. He efficiency-wise, he had 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, completed everything because the Raiders' secondary is bad. And so I think the Bills come out here and they rebound at home. And when they win big. That's what the Bills have done under Josh Allen, because usually if you get good Josh Allen, then it's really good Josh Allen. And they also have one of the best defenses in the NFL. And Allen has won 53 games in the NFL. 37 of those have come by more than 7 points, which isn't easy to do in the NFL. So when the Bills win, they do win big. And on the other side of the ball, look, Jimmy G can operate this offense. He can win you games, but there's 2 things with him. He's not going to beat the elite quarterbacks in the AFC in a shootout. So when, if they go up against the Chiefs and their games get into the high 30, Jimmy G's not going to be able to keep up. He's also going to be under much more pressure this week against this Bills defense. And if there's one thing we know with Jimmy G, great when he's in a clean pocket. And the Broncos only pressured with 4 dropbacks last week. When he's under pressure, his performance falls off the map because he's not able to elude any pressure or get outside the pocket and do anything. He's also dealing with an ankle injury. You got to keep in mind Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers, their top 2 receivers, didn't practice today. One in concussion protocol. Adams dealing with a foot injury. DeAndre Carter, their 4th, he also didn't practice with a calf. So they're banged up too, going across country. I think the Bills come out and make a statement. There are rumblings of other things, like you said, is something off. If they don't come out here, number one, they lose this game. But if they don't come out here and take care of business and it just looks off, you might be right. And it's going to be definitely worth digging into. But I'm going to trust them to bounce back here and lay it under 10.
Yeah, and, Jacobs obviously Denver's defense based on last year was solid. So him having under 50 yards isn't crazy. But, the Jets ran for 172. Now, granted, 83 of them came on 1 run. So I would imagine Josh McDaniels is going to try to slow down the game, run the ball, especially at the receivers. So I think it's fair to assume Jacoby's not going to play, but the Devontae thing would be a problem, not just this week, but that's big picture if a foot can linger. Speaking of the Jets, what would this number have been? What was the number before the Monday night game for the Cowboy game? Was it 5-ish, you think?
No, it was 3. So the market has... Yeah, the Cowboys were -3, and then you had the Cowboys winning in dominant fashion. and then you had Rodgers going down. I played the Jets here. I hate Zach Wilson. I've slandered him for years, ever since he got into the league. I think he's a backup at best. But I just think this is too many points, too big of an over adjustment. Like an adjustment for an elite quarterback to his backup, and would be the top of the line starter, 7 points. That's as high as you normally get in the NFL. Maybe Rodgers to like Tim Boyle 8 years ago could have been
in his MVP
9 points. Yeah, because Tim Boyle like threw 1 touchdown and 16 interceptions at UConn. So it depends on the level of the backup. And Zach Wilson, at least as starts, he's covered 4 of 7 times when he's getting more than 7. He has some experience, but Rodgers wasn't the same elite level quarterback that he was, a couple of years ago. So there was questions about him coming into this year. How effective is he going to be? We knew it was going to be an upgrade, but behind that offensive line, and unfortunately we couldn't figure out, but we never got to find out. But I think that the adjustment from Rodgers to Wilson isn't as big as some might think, right? I think it's only maybe 4.5, 5 points, which is still substantial, but it's not monumental like it used to be and like it is right now for a Mahomes. And you still have this Jets defense, which arguably is the best in the NFL. They have the secondary. They have the dudes up front on the defensive line. They're deep and dominant. They can give this Dallas offensive line, which isn't at 100% yet, some trouble. And this is one of the things you see this in basketball, because the Cowboys look great last week, but what did we really learn? Like, we knew their defense was dominant. Their offense didn't have to do anything. Brandon Cooks is now hurt, so they'll have to find another.
They got a special teams touchdown on a block field goal.
Special teams touchdown. They got a pick 6, and the game just got out of hand from there. Their offense didn't have to do anything. It's going to be a different story this week, and you see this in basketball a lot. The Jets are getting written off, right? Like, they're done now, Rodgers, and it's probably true. But this is the first game without Rodgers, and this is when you see, like in basketball, if you lose your star player, the next game everyone else steps up. I actually even like it even more when you go on the road. It's like us against the world, and then that kind of wears off after 2 games. And we'll see if the biggest thing I'm watching with the Jets, if they do stick with Zach Wilson, he loses the game. Does he take accountability? Otherwise, he could lose that locker room quick if he comes out and answers questions like he did last year. But I think everyone else rises up here with that defense. This is just too many points in a game with a total of 39. I think both coaches are going to play this super conservatively, especially early, because the Jets are going to say, look, we got to rely on our defense. We can't have Zach Wilson make mistakes. The Cowboys are going to say, all right, look, we're playing Zach Wilson. We can let our defense win this. And all the talk in the offseason about Dak's interception problems, which I felt were a little overblown, but I feel like, and he talked about that a lot. So I feel like early on, he's going to be super conservative. He guaranteed he's not going to throw more than 10. So I don't think he's going to take a lot of shots. He might be a little gun shy, take stuff underneath, and it'll be really conservative on offense for the Cowboys. So I think this sets up as like a rock fight that the Cowboys win, 17-13. So I'll take the points for what it's worth. Teams following a win of 35 or more points, which the Cowboys had last week, teams are just 34, 53, and 4 against the spread. That's 39% over the past 20 years. That kind of speaks to the overreaction you see at times in the market, and especially early on. If you recall, and in this spot, it's 0-4 in week 2 after teams won by 35 plus in week 1. The Saints, they blew out the Packers, I think like 41-0. They beat Aaron Rodgers. They had a play, I think, down in Florida in the humidity because of the hurricane. Next week, the market overreacts. They go to Carolina and they get destroyed. So never want to overreact. I don't think we learned that much about the Cowboys. I'm going to count on this Jets D and the locker room kind of responding to the circumstances.
Well, I think one thing, if I told you Aaron Rodgers had played 17 games, this defense would have been in the mix to be the number 1 scoring defense, right? And usually number 1 scoring defense is what? In the peak, somewhere like 13, 14, but probably in modern day would be closer to like 17, 18, 19. So you're still going to get that level. They might tap out if the season's a disaster by late November or whatever, but right now you're getting that version. So if you just say, okay, the Cowboys scored 20, I mean, can they score 12, 13 points, right? I mean, I think it's very, very possible. And who knows? Maybe they can hold them under 20. Maybe that number's more 17. All they got to get to is 10, right? So it's like you said, it's basically a math equation. So, and that's so I'm with you there. It's just that number is enormous. Okay, the Denver Bronco season got off to a weird start because you're right. I looked up and it was like, God, he actually feels a little better than he did last year, just moving around. He definitely looks slimmer just in terms of more spry. He was being efficient. He was throwing touchdowns, but the game they couldn't, it was close. And then Jimmy D throws a pick, and you're like, oh, Denver's going to win this thing. And somehow the Raiders pull the game out of their ass and win. And you're like, God, they're 0-1. Now they play the Commanders, who I picked Arizona last week, who I thought had them, but they are the Cardinals. One thing with Washington, I mean, that D-line is pretty freaking good. I mean, they can get after your ass. I don't know. I mean, I just have a hard time with Denver. I really do. But I know a lot of people. You're not alone here. I think this is a great spot for them. This game feels weird to me, almost like a stay away.
Yeah, I played the Broncos. I played them small at 3.5 because I'm waiting to see, maybe because of injury news, if it does go down to 3, obviously the most important number when betting the NFL. So, and then if it goes to 3, I would love it even more. But I think this is a good bounce back spot. I like some of the things that I saw from Peyton and his influence on this offense. They used play action a ton. They used an extra offensive lineman a ton. They used an extra blocker, whether it's a tight end or wide receiver in protection, a lot. And Russ wasn't under pressure a whole lot. Everything was like just it reminded me of what Dable and them, which is crazy to say about Russ, because Russ was washed the last couple of years. What Dable and them did with Daniel Jones, they really just simplified everything and gave him easy throws and easy reads, and the offense operated efficiently. What it was missing was any form. It was complete. There was a void of explosiveness. I think there was 2 plays that went for over 18 yards, and one was like a screen, I think. So they didn't throw it all downfield. Peyton acknowledged that and said, "Look, yeah, we need to bring some explosiveness into the offense," and that is ultimately what held them back last week. Other than Damari Mathis, one of their corners, got roasted the entire game opposite Surtain. But so I think you'll see a few more deep shots off of that play action, which makes sense. It's just like, here, give them easy throws, easy reads, and then boom, let's take a deep shot every once in a while. The problem is they have a lot of injuries at their wide receiver room, but I think they'll get Judy back this week. Reading the tea leaves, Peyton said like they warmed him up. They thought he was going to play. Hamstrings are tricky, but now 0-1, you're playing a division opponent. I think he's going to give it a go, and they said he was close last week. That would be massive because they just need that spark, whether it be someone getting open deep or just a guy who can take a slam.
Breton.
And then go for 30 and just bring you yak, which like you see all the time and with the myriad of weapons that the 49ers have. Last week, the Broncos just didn't have that. It's just like, here, complete the pass, and then they would get tackled. So I think there's a good chance Judy plays, which would be huge. But the main thing here is that this is so I think Peyton, the big coaching mismatch here, and for what it's worth, Peyton, out of 145 coaches over the past 20 years, he's the second most profitable behind Belichick after a loss. He's 52-29 against the spread, over 64% after a loss, covering by about 4 points per game. But this is also a fade of Washington, who didn't look great at all last week. Went back and watched that game because Sam Howell took 6 sacks. And I'm like, how do you take 6 sacks against this Arizona defense? They have nobody. I mean, Watt had all their sacks last year. So I went back and looked, and he holds the ball way too long. And I mean, it just was indecisive, and he would invite pressure eventually and try to make things happen that weren't there. That's a bad sign. Now, it doesn't mean you can't fix it, but a bad sign right now. Now you're going into a hostile environment against a better defense than Arizona's. And, you got to hope that Denver makes adjustment. With Mathis has to play better. Surtain's going to take one of their receivers away. He locked down Adams last week when he was on him, and he's arguably the best in the business. But I think Hal on the road here, hostile environment, in a place where teams, especially out of conference, struggle early on in that altitude. I think that Denver bounces back, gets this win. I'll trust Peyton to make the necessary adjustments on the offense to bring in some explosiveness. Hope that Judy's going to play, and I just don't trust Hal in how he looked last week. That he did all the things you don't want to see from a young quarterback. I keep referencing the 49ers game. You watch Purdy, it's like, okay, he knows when to get out of the pocket and he knows when to be decisive. Hal just never made the same decisions. You see the same thing with Fields, not making those throws and then inaccurate when he does. So this is a big chunk of this is a fade of Hal. and where I think this offense is, and I think it's going to struggle until he kind of figures it out, if he ever does. Sometimes quarterbacks don't at this level.
Yeah, Fields is another guy. If they get their butt kicked by the Bucks, people are going to start, getting off him hard. It feels like there's a lot of two games that I'm definitely keeping an eye on. Titans getting points at home against the Chargers, and the Packers against the Falcons, +1. So I mean, technically they're typically a home team, you get 3 points. So now maybe I'm undervaluing Atlanta. That's just a game that I'll take the Titans before I took the Packers, but whoever wins that game in the Packer-Atlanta game, maybe we'll have to start talking about, depending on what some of these, like the Giants, obviously Seattle's playing the Lions. Could that Atlanta, like if Atlanta wins, are we talking about them as, a playoff level team? That's something I'm definitely keeping an eye on.
Yeah, I actually took the Falcons and the Packers preseason to win their divisions. Now, what really hurt that is the Lions stealing that win against the Chiefs, like getting a win over the Chiefs on the road. That's huge for the Lions.
Get to 10 like that because you just that with that swing.
Yeah, so that was pretty big. But yeah, the upside with Jordan Love, he looked great last week. Granted, it was against a bad Bears defense, but they still have a really talented defense. I think Atlanta improved their defense. You saw Jesse Bates, Onyemata. Yeah. They played really well. Some of their offseason acquisitions. They still don't really have an edge rush, which I think might ultimately hold them back. And Ritter Ritter's average depth of target was like 3.4 yards. Like
Ritter stinks.
Yeah, I mean, it was just screens, and like the only one who had a lower average depth of target, by the way, which is crazy in a blowout, where was Justin Fields was 3 yards, and he had some wide open guys he missed. The only thing I would worry about with the Packers, I still don't know if their run defense looked better last week, but the Bears' offensive line was a mess. Their run D has historically been bad under Barry, and it's some of that's like they'll funnel that in and want it by design. But you can run on them, and that's all Atlanta can and wants to do. Like they're like kind of like a service academy in the NFL, and they just want to run at you a million different ways. So they just control the clock and move up and down the field against Green Bay? That would be my concern there, in addition to the injuries for Green Bay. So we don't know about Watson and Aaron Jones, another hamstring guy. That Aaron Jones is so important because you just see that the difference in explosiveness between him and Dylan. Like Dylan will get you, he'll move forward for you, but he just doesn't have that burst. And Jones can do so many different things, not only in the run game, but on screens and going out for routes. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. As far as the Titans are concerned, it's taking 3 with Vrabel. Whenever you can take points with Vrabel, you have to do it. So I like that one much more than the Atlanta one. I'll be watching Tannehill closely though, because he basically, I know there was a blown call, but he missed a couple wide open touchdowns, bad picks. He wasn't even under pressure that much. He looked bad. You can have an off game, but once a quarterback starts to get up there in age, it's like, all right, let me see what's going on here. So I'll be watching that closely. But it's kind of like the team that generally covers the dog and always wins these close games versus a team that always finds a way to lose these close games in the Chargers. So yeah, I don't mind that Tennessee one at all.
Okay, Stuckey, let's enjoy the weekend. Have some cocktails. So you see you rocking the Tito's. Have a good couple Tito's and sodas Saturday and Sunday, and let's win these bets, baby. Let's roll.
Yeah, let's have a weekend, and I'll see all you guys next week.